Okay, everybody, I'm going to do today's video based off of the RFA selection that the group made. And looking in your D2L, everybody that voted said that they were good with doing the RFA for the NSF that was submitted. And this particular one is the ITEST grant. And it's important as you look forward, look at an RFA, as you look forward to writing a proposal, that you know exactly which one you're writing. The NSF in particular is a really large organization, and they give out a lot of different grants worth of money. So you have to know which one you're doing, and they tend to do a lot of ITEST, ISTEP, things like that. A lot of times the I stands for innovative, it seems, but they got other stuff too. But anyway, so this is the one we're doing, Innovative Technology Experiences for Students and Teachers. And I think it's important to note that students and teachers part. So as you go through, we'll talk about some stuff. And I'll kind of break down what we need to do for you guys to be able to write this grant in the next couple of weeks. But it's important that teachers bid, I think, because whatever you guys choose to do, and this really is a group decision, so I'll do what I did for this selection of the RFA. I'll go with majority rules. There are 5 of you guys and gals. So if I get 3 responses saying one thing, then we'll go with that. If some of you don't respond, then I apologize for you not getting your input, but you should be checking on your class daily and hopefully responding daily. So hopefully we'll get some really good feedback going as I put you guys into more discussions about this particular grant. Anyway, I think it's important that as you choose what kind of grant you're going to do and what the topic will be, that you keep in mind it's both students and teachers. And as you read through this, we're talking PK through 12. So these are not college students, these are public school students. And I guess they don't have to be public schools. It doesn't say public, I just always think public. So they're just PK through 12. So if you had a private high school or something that wanted to participate, you might be okay with that. I didn't see anywhere in the grant that it says not private, and I'm looking and it doesn't say that. So I'm assuming any PK through 12. Anyway, so what are we going to do? Oh my gosh, this is a huge thing. There's lots going on. And so I have broken it down into steps, which is kind of the Webster way. What do we need to do first, basically? So step number 1, what we need to do, and why I'm using that royal we, where you guys are going to make this decision, and you're going to make it by putting comments in the discussion board under the RFA suggestions. Okay, so for step number 1, you need to decide what kind of program. So there's 3 things I want you to decide first, and I'll maybe put a prompt in for us to look at that. Okay, so the reason I say what kind of program, yes, this is technology experiences for students and teachers, but they actually have 3 main programs, grants that you can write, plus 3 secondary. Okay, so we need to kind of look at that. Now, for all of this stuff that we're going to be doing in step 1, you don't have to print the RFA. I just find it easier for me if I can leaf back and forth rather than using like a PDF or something. But for all of these, we're going to focus on pages 1 through 8 of the grant proposal. I'm sorry, the RFA. So as I look at it, I'll try to remember to tell you which page I'm looking at and that kind of stuff. So anyway, on page 1 of this thing, if you read down here, the synopsis of the program is the first major bulky piece of text there, and mine is really small, so I apologize. It has lots of different options for us. So what experience are we looking for to use technology with students? Now these are going to be STEM areas, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and they also specifically suss out information, what do they call it, ICT, oh goodness, information and communication technologies. So that would be probably a more modern way of saying the T in STEM would be my way of thinking about that. Anyway, some highlights I've got written down, and I just went through and looked at some of the major things. They're wanting innovative usages of technology. They want things that'll strengthen the knowledge and the interest in STEM fields, so some kind of science, technology, engineering, math. And by the way, these grants are large enough that, for instance, if we had somebody who wanted to do a physics thing and somebody who wanted to do a math thing, and maybe we could figure out how to make that cross-disciplinary, they actually, one of the pieces in this grant is strategic partnerships. So if you had somebody who was an engineering teacher, somebody who was a computer science teacher, somebody who was a math teacher, somebody who was a science, physics, biology, chemistry, whatever, and you guys had some common experiences that you wanted these students to share across the board, then that would actually strengthen the grant proposal if we could be cross-disciplinary. And it doesn't matter what area, but we do need to kind of refine that and focus in on what we want to do. So anyway, increase student awareness and interest in the STEM, and they have ICT, that's that information and communication technologies. But personally, I consider that technology, but they're counting it differently. Anyway, to motivate them to pursue an education in a career in one of these STEM fields. All right, so that would be, hey, you ever think about going to college? Or did you ever think about this tech school that would help you with these technical skills, vocation, whatever. But looking at the education that it would take for them to get to whatever career that is. And then the third thing that they're really wanting to happen is develop STEM content knowledge to promote, and they have three things: critical thinking, reasoning, and communication. Okay, so those are just some highlights of this area right here. Also important to know is that these grants will support both in-class and out-of-class activities. So from that, I take the idea of workshops or after-school tutoring programs or field trips, things like that. So it does not have to be just, this is the curriculum we're going to show in our classroom, okay? And of course, they want underrepresented groups, and that's not just minorities, as in ethnic groups. That is also females, because females are considered underrepresented in the STEM fields. And it's also people with low socioeconomic areas. So if you're in a school that is primarily low socioeconomic, you receive all that lovely funding from the federal government, then maybe your school would be one of the schools that participated in this, so that you could talk about your underrepresented groups. Okay, so those are just some of the things we need to kind of focus on. Research plan. Okay, so there's also a research plan, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that's my next piece. So first, let me show you page where these program types are, because we're still talking about what kind of program do we want. Okay. If you will go to, if you have it, page 6 at the bottom. Okay, so you have to kind of know what each of these describes. So page 6 at the bottom down here, that's really blurry. Okay, says exploring theory and design principles. So that's one of the major types that they have. And I think that that could be one of the things that y'all could do. Basically, read through it, make sure you know what it's talking about. But my idea of it is it's developing a concept or a plan for engaging students and teachers. So it's kind of like developing it, coming up with a prototype of what it would look like, the learning framework for what you would do with those students, those kinds of things. So that's type 1. We could do that. Type 2, developing and testing innovations. So again, read that, talk about what is going on, but my idea for that is actually implementing it with groups, students and teachers alike. So it seems like they want you to directly use whatever it is, whatever curriculum, whatever innovation, whatever intervention. If you're going to do field trips, they want you to actually do it. and see how it goes, and research it and see if it's worth doing again. So I think we could do this. In fact, this was probably the one I think you guys would want to do, because you would want to actually do this stuff with your students. You're not just wanting to develop it necessarily. I could be wrong, but so let me know. But I don't think you're just wanting to develop it. I'm thinking you're wanting to actually implement it and do it and see the results and see if students and teachers do better with it, and so on and so forth. Okay. The third one is scaling, expanding and iterating innovations, and I've got a note there. I've got an X beside it with a question mark. This is probably not us, because what they're saying is you already have a pre-existing innovation, and then you're going to scale it, which means take it from like your one classroom and put it across all kinds of classrooms and all kinds of public schools and different districts and this and that. So unless somebody has something that they're already doing that's innovative and technology based, and they would like to scale it up and put it across Texas, this is probably not us. But it might be, so let me know if I'm wrong. Okay, then those are the three major project types. Then their three backups are synthesis studies, and again, I've got that's probably not us. And the reason why is because they want a meta-analysis, and what that means is you take a whole bunch of studies that have already been done and you analyze them and come up with commonalities between them and things like that. And so again, it's probably not us. We don't have a lot of studies to synthesize. So that one's probably not us. But again, it could be if you already have stuff out there that I don't know about. The conference projects, I actually kind of like that one for me at the higher education area, because I could bring in people in the public schools, teachers and different principals and people like that. But it's specifically talking about educating, professional development basically for researchers and practitioners, which would be educators. So while I might consider that one for me at the university level, I doubt that you guys would probably be interested in it. So probably not. And then the last one is an ITEST resource center, which is basically you turn your facility into a place where you can develop a community of educators, and those people can come in. So again, that's probably not us. We're probably not doing a lot of professional development for people to come to our center. So I don't think that one's us. As you read through these, I've kind of circled, for instance, this conference one. It has some information underneath it, up to 1 year, up to $100,000. So that's the second thing that you need to figure out. Once you know what kind of program, you want to know how long will it run. And these are preliminary questions. This is just background information basically for us to think about. And I want these answers. I'm going to put a due date of Sunday on them. So hopefully y'all can talk amongst yourselves in the next few days. Either set up a meeting or do the discussion board. But once you decide amongst yourself what kind of program, how long will it run, what are you asking for funding for, is basically what they want to know. And then the third thing is the budget amount. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, they're willing to give me $100,000. I want $100,000. And that is fine, okay? But I noticed that some of these grants, the Developing and Testing Innovations one, it's up to 4 years. So that means up to. It could be 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year. So if we don't want to do it for 4 years, then we don't have to say we're going to do 4 years. Now, if you want the full $1.5 million, that's up to $1.5 million, then we should probably go ahead and make sure that we do the 4 years, because they're probably not going to give you $1.5 million on a 1 year grant, right? But if you only wanted to do this grant for 2 years, you might ask for $700,000. You don't have to ask for the total that they're willing to give you. In fact, sometimes if you scale back a tiny bit, they're like, oh, they're not being greedy, let's look at their proposal. And sometimes they like that even more. So depending on which one, if we went for that first one, which was the Exploring Theory and Design, Exploring Theory and Design Principles, ETD, where you're developing a prototype kind of thing. That one's up to 3 years, up to $400,000. So again, you need to pick the kind of program you want, which means you need an idea of what kind of experiences we're after. Okay, if we don't have an idea for that, then we don't know what kind of program we want, right? So pick the kind that you're going to do first, and then talk about how long you feel like it should run, and then talk about what kind of budget amount we're looking at, okay? And some of you be like, I don't know what things cost, I don't know what we should pay people. I agree, that's what we'll develop in the next couple of weeks. But you can kind of say, oh, well, this one goes up to $300,000, let's try for the $300,000. You're not going to be locked into it, but if for some reason you tell me $100,000 and then you get into it and you're like, oh, this is more than we thought, which happens a lot of times things cost more than we think they're going to cost, especially in education for whatever reason. But whenever you get there, that we don't necessarily want to expand up. It's easier to cut down than it is to go up sometimes. Okay, so those three things are the big to do. And then the fourth thing that's in there, and I'll talk a little bit about in a minute, is a research plan. So this is NSF. This is National Science Foundation. And if they're going to give you $400,000, then dang it, they want to make sure that you're doing research and that you have a plan, you have evaluation, you have data you're going to collect, and you have a plan for how you're going to share that information with them. So we kind of need to think, how will we do that? So let me give you some examples, okay? So I'm not just deciding, I'm just throwing out some ideas, and you guys please throw out other ideas and come on with stuff you want to do. So for number one, some of my thoughts were new curriculum for a classroom. Maybe somebody has a really cool idea that they want to use, either in their classroom or expand to other classrooms. That's one of the things you might think about. Okay. Number two, what about field trips? Are there area things that are really cool STEM-y activities that would be awesome to take your students to, that would help encourage their interest in technology? Some of those things could be used in here, like day trips with the students and stuff like that. So I'll say field trips for the students. What about workshops or conferences for the teachers? Okay, also known as professional development, right? Okay, for instance, in Texas, there's the not this year, unfortunately, because of the COVID, but there's the CAMP conference for the advancement of mathematics teaching, and that happens in the summer, and we bring thousands of math teachers from around the state of Texas together, and we talk about new and innovative things you can do, and a lot of those will be technology driven. So if we wanted to provide a professional development for the classroom teachers in a certain school district, or more than one school district, depending on who wants to do what, then we could certainly bring that together and say, okay, what activities would we like to fund for the teachers to get a little bit of learning as well. There is going to be, I want to correct myself, there will be a CAMP conference this year. It's just not going to be the July in-person one. They're going to do a virtual one later, like I think August 1st or something. So it'll be a little bit later. All right, anyway. Conferences for the teachers. Sometimes if you have people who are really interested in a certain field, even though they're students, they might want to go to some kind of a professional development workshop or something like that to see what stuff would look like for them. So maybe that's something that would be cool. Activities. And this could be in class or out of class. I'm going to say after school, weekends. So perhaps you have a really cool lab that you want to do with your students that you want to develop, and maybe you need some probes, or maybe you need some particular software to help run some of that stuff. This grant will help pay for that for classrooms and for teachers. So that is there, just be aware. Okay, so those are some of my thoughts on what kinds of things we might do. And then to back that up, so that's number one. Number two would be, I would say, run the maximum, but you don't have to. And number three, it's going to depend on which grant. So think about that. Number four, though, the research plan. Some ideas for that. Well, if we take a bunch of students on a cool field trip, then maybe we will survey them. That might be one way that we could collect data from them. So, how to collect data and analyze our program. We'll say outcomes. Okay, so maybe a survey. If we're specifically looking at their knowledge base to see if we affected them or not, maybe a pre-test, post-test about particular types of content, right? So we can test them beforehand and see if they know anything at all about, I don't know, robotics. And then after we've done whatever interventions, maybe we take them on a field trip to go to the place in Greenville that I can't think of their name right now. Innovation First. I'm sorry, I can't think. I think it's Innovations First. Anyway, maybe we take them on a trip to there to see how the robotics function and things like that. Then we do a post-test afterwards. Maybe we do a treatment and a control group, where the treatment group would be the one who goes on the field trip, and the control group is the kids who stayed back at the school, and then we compare their knowledge. And again, as I throw ideas out here like robotics or whatever, these are just basic thoughts of things you can do. I am not saying we have to do that. I'm just throwing around stuff. If you have other cool field trips or whatever and you think that would be good to do, then by all means throw those ideas out there. I'm just trying to give a for instance. Okay, so maybe that's one way we could do it. Maybe we could do interviews. And those could be with both students and the teachers. Okay, one-on-one interviews where we collect some qualitative data. Qualitative meaning that it's not necessarily numerical. It's more anecdotal a lot of times. It's more those people's stories or experiences. Maybe we could do some focus groups. Okay, so these are just a few ideas I have. You don't have to do all of them. You might want to do multiples of them in order to get at different pieces of how you're doing stuff and what you're doing. But one thing for sure, one of the first things we need to do after we know what type of study we're going to do is we need to figure out, well, what do we think for collecting data? We don't have to hammer this out just yet, but I'd like for you to start throwing some ideas around. So these four things, type of program, how long, budget, research, I'm going to put into the discussion board for you guys to hammer out and talk amongst yourself in the next few days. Today is Thursday, so I would like to have that by Sunday, so that you can have some good ideas for what we're going to do with this, because it's scary and exciting at the same time, right? It's a big grant, and it's a big project, and there's a lot going on with it, and there's a lot of moving parts, and we'll talk about those as we go. But for instance, right now, I don't want you to worry about any of the grant, any of the thing at all past page 8, okay? So I think there are about 16 pages in this thing. Yep, exactly 16. So we're only looking at the first half right now. Don't even worry yourself about the second half. So this is step 1 for us. We need to do this. This is the first thing I'm going to require from you. It'll be due on Sunday. Okay. Then, so I don't want to go too far ahead, and I don't want to scare anybody. But then, step 2 for us is going to be we actually need to start writing it, right? So, well, before we get there, let me point out some other stuff to you. So here's page 2. Again, And if it says must do or requirement, then you must do those, or they're not even going to look at your submission. So we're going to make sure we do those things. So research plan must be addressed, and they've got information in here for who you contact with questions. We may need that later, so I just pointed that out. They've got two different kinds of grants listed, a standard grant or a continuing grant. We would be a standard grant because we haven't applied for this before. But if we had already been given this grant the last year or two, and then we said, hey, that thing we're doing with those robotics kids, we want to continue doing it, then we would be applying for a continuing grant. They say that they're going to award around 22 to 30 of these things, but it's very specific, so be careful. The one where you're designing curriculum, they're only planning to give about 6 to 8 of those awards out. The one where you're actually engaging the students and the teachers with the curriculum or whatever the thing is we're doing, they're planning to give 8 to 10 of those. Now that's the most that they're planning to give, so maybe we should think about that one for that reason, as well as it's a longer time period, it's doing stuff with the kids, and it's a bigger budget. But we don't have to ask for a $1.5 million. Okay, and then the other ones have others, but those first two I feel like are probably the ones you're going to look at. Of course, they've got the disclaimer in here. Here's where the money comes from, and I found it interesting that this money comes from H-1 visas, which those are the visas that they charge people who are international faculty members to work in the country, and different international people, but in particular faculty members who aren't citizens have to do that. I think it's interesting. And of course, they've got this disclaimer, it's subject to the availability of funds. Okay, this thing, who may write the proposals? Who may submit a proposal? And they say everything you need to know, and the NSF does this. They have the basic guidebook for all of their stuff, and then they'll say, okay, this is generic for all of our stuff, the proposal and award policies and procedures guide, which this is the newest one. This is the June 1st, 2021. So this is brand new, hot off the presses. Okay. So they'll say that's our guidebook for everybody, and then inside of this RFA is specific stuff that's specific to this particular project that we're putting together. So in this one it says who can submit a proposal, go to the PAPPG, lots and lots of acronyms in this stuff, right? If you haven't figured that out already. And go to Chapter 1, Part E. So look it up. I actually had this pulled up on my computer, but then I realized if I have the document camera, it's hard for me to go into Chrome or something like that. So basically, I went to Google and I typed in NSF PAPPG. It's right there. It's on page 2, kind of halfway down. NSF PAPPG is what I typed into my Google, and it came up, and there was one right there. It was either the first or the second link, and it said NSF PAPPG 2020, and so that's the one I picked up. And again, the front page is a black page with this really cool design on it. I'm sure that's something very scientific. Oh, I don't know what those are. Kind of look like pencils and test tubes. Anyway, so a really cool design on the front of it. That's how you'll know you got to the right page. And then it says 1E, Chapter 1, Section E. So as I come through and I find that, who may submit the proposals, and that is on page I-4. So I'm going to pull that up. I-4. So this thing is actually like, I think it said 140 pages. I only printed through what I needed because I'll probably skim it online if I need other stuff. But I wanted to be able to print this, so I did. So here's I-4. Let go. Who may submit proposals? This is Chapter 1, Section E. NSF welcomes proposals on behalf of all qualified scientists, engineers, and educators. Blah, 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 blah. So there's a lot of stuff in there, and it talks about the legalities and how they get the money from the federal government and stuff like that. But then here's what we care about. Categories of proposers, institutions of higher education. That means that universities can apply. So we can do this no matter what. But there's other people. So this is not necessarily restricted just to institutions of higher education. But those are normally the ones that do it. You can tell because it's number 1 in the category. So it says, except where a program solicitation, that's our RFA, establishes a more restrictive eligibility criteria, which it did not. It said, look at the PAPPG. So it's going with exactly by what this says. Organizations in the following categories may submit proposals. Okay, so there's those. And then nonprofit, non-academic organizations. Okay, so, and they give some examples: independent museums, observatories, people like that. For-profit organizations. So this would be somebody who's actually, making money. I'm trying to think. Maybe it's Bill Nye the Science Guy or somebody like that. He's got products out there. He's making money. He's a commercial organization kind of thing. State and local governments. Well, we're not that, but the state of Texas could apply. And unaffiliated individuals, so unless specifically authorized in an NSF solicitation, unaffiliated individuals in the U.S. and unaffiliated U.S. citizens are not eligible to receive direct funding support from NSF. So what does that mean? I can't go out on my own as Dr. Webster and go apply for this funding. Okay, they're not going to give me personally $1.5 million. It's just not going to work that way, right? And they're trying to make that very, very clear. So, not going to happen. All right, so you need to be affiliated with an institution of higher education or something like that. It says foreign organizations, so we rarely provide direct funding to foreign organizations, but we will consider proposals for cooperative projects that involve both the U.S. and foreign organizations and other federal government agencies. They don't give out money, like the NSF isn't going to give out money to the FBI. That's what they're saying. Not normally. Okay, so there you go. All right, several places in this document also, it tells us when it's due. The 2020 deadline is, I think it was August 14th. I'll point it out when I see it again. I think it was on the first page and I skipped it. Okay. Now, so that's what all this is. Interesting stuff. There's no restrictions on who can be the PI, the principal investigator. There's no restrictions on how many of these I can submit from one organization. So if I want to do one and Dr. Yoon wants to do one, that's okay. We can both submit, and as long as it's not the same proposal, we have different ideas, they might both be funded, right? It's doubtful because they're only giving out 8 to 10 in the whole U.S. or 6 to 8, depending on which one we pick. But it's possible. Okay, all this stuff down here, when it's talking about proposal preparation instructions, this is an online program system, and I will try to find a template. I'm pretty sure I have a template somewhere and get it out to us, just so we can see the kinds of information that they're going to ask for. But this has to be submitted by an authorized person at the institution of higher education. So it's either our grants office or somebody that they authorize. So not just any person can go and submit that. That's what they're telling you. Okay. They don't take cost sharing. It says inclusion of voluntary committed cost sharing is prohibited. However, indirect cost limitations, there are not any. So last time I looked, I think A&M Commerce asked for 37 or 38% of your funds for indirect costs. Most of my grants don't have indirect costs because my agencies will say no indirect costs because they don't want to fund staff positions for the grants office or something like that. They want all of their money to go straight to the use of the grant, what it's for. But NSF is not like that. So they will allow anything in there. And I actually have a budget template I'm going to show in a second. And it shows some stuff that I think it was like really large percentages. So you may only want $400,000 for your funding. However, if the school is going to take, let's just make it nice and say 33%. Let's say you only want $300,000, but the school wants 33%, then they want $100,000 in indirect cost, right? So that adds to your budget line. And that number, whatever that percentage is, changes. So if, for instance, just then I changed my number from $400,000 to $300,000 because I wanted the numbers to be big, or easy to do in my head. But if my number changed to $600,000, then guess what? Yep, 33% of that is now $200,000. So we would have to add that into our budget as we went. All right, August 14th, 2020. There is this lovely table of contents on page 3, and then they go through all of those areas. I'm not going to go through them. I would say if you're looking at this between now and Sunday, what you should focus in on is page 4, where they talk about the program description and the things that they're willing to fund, like innovative learning experiences, maybe taking field trips or stuff like that, workforce development, broadening participation, strategic partnerships. So all of those things are things they're going to want us to talk about. And then measuring our outcomes through high quality research. So we're going to have to put that together. All right, so page 4, and then as I already pointed out, the bottom of, here's something on project evaluation, so pay attention to that. But the bottom of page 6, that's where, I would say page 6 and page 7 is where you should really be focusing to talk about the types of the grants. And then as you get over to page 8, that's just the continuation of one of the things and then some definitions. So for me, don't look past page 8 right now. We will get to step 2, which is going to be, we need to write that, and we will split things up. If you really want to look a little bit ahead, page 10 has the basic pages that they want us to talk about. Cover sheet, project summary, project description, project overview, results, expertise, budget, so on and so forth. So, but we're not there yet. That'll actually be step 2, so hold off on that. We're not ready for it just yet. There's one more little piece of information I wanted to share with you. It's a budget template from NSF, and I will probably just load this into D2L so you can see it. Here is a 3-year budget. They also have a 5-year budget template so you can see it. And it's got some information on there, so things that you might consider as your funding. You don't have to have all of these areas, but there are things that you might want as you go through. So for instance, if you are the faculty member and you're going to pay yourself a summer stipend, say $4,000, then for year 1 you would put $4,000, year 2, year 3, and then down here notice that there are certain percentages, the fringe benefits. For full-time faculty, it's normally around 32% for fringe, for taxes and all that, and for students and such, it's normally like 6.5%. A GAR, graduate research assistant, those people are in there. Do we need undergraduate students? So all of that we'll talk about once we actually have an idea of what we're going to do and what that's going to look like. Do we need equipment? Do we need to travel? Do we need to support our participants? If we're bringing students in, you know, who knows? Maybe some of them need rides on, if we're doing a Saturday thing. Maybe some of them don't have a vehicle, so we might need to provide transportation or something like that. Maybe some of them have children and we might need to provide childcare. So we'll think about those things as we go on. Materials and supplies, things that we need to do, any consulting fees. There's all kinds of stuff in there. So we'll talk about that as we go on. I'll just load it up. There's also a worksheet, so it gives you some ideas. If you're thinking about this, then think about that, and maybe here's some money. So I'll load those up so you can see them. You have your work cut out for you. So step 1, let me throw that right back up here again real quickly. Step 1, you have 4 major things to look at. Look at pages 1 through 8. What kind of program, how long, what's your budget, and what kind of research would you like to do on it? Like, we want to do something fun and cool and take our students somewhere cool, or provide ourselves with conference opportunities or whatever, and we all get that, right? We want to make sure that we each get a stipend, that kind of thing. We get that. That is all stuff we can write into the grant. But ultimately, the plan is we're going to do this intervention. I'm going to say field trips. We're going to take our kids here to the robotics place, and we're going to have these outcomes. And here's how we'll know if we met our outcomes, if our students or our teachers or whoever got what they should have gotten out of it. Here's how we'll know. Here's how we will evaluate it. So start thinking about those 4 things, and that'll be due Sunday, and that's it. All right. Thanks. Bye.